today's scenario, we start inside a pod and we have a service account mounted inside of that pod. And we want to try to elevate privileges. So one of the things that we can do within that pod is we can create other pods. And we use that to elevate our privileges and take over the cluster, basically. So without any more explanation, let's get started. Okay, so to get started, we are going to go to Kube Security Lab and start the SSH to create pods easy scenario. This is the command. I've already ran it because it takes a few minutes to start up. And now what we want to do is just go into our client machine. So docker exec-it for interactive, the name of our pod, and the command we want to run. There we go. And I'm going to set our target IP to a variable. That's the target IP for the scenario we're running right now. And we're going to start off with a scan. -on to save this to a file. Now, in this scenario, we're actually meant to SSH in. So, for example, if you go to Kube Security Lab and go to the scenario setups, for this scenario, SSH to create pod easy, we're just supposed to SSH in. So we're basically meant to already have pod access and try to elevate from there. So on port 32001, we see the SSH service, and the SSH username is just SSH user. We have our IP saved there. We specify a port, and this should log us in. We just need to type in the password, which is SSH user. Again, this is specified in the scenario setup on the Kube Security Lab repo. And we're in. So as usual, the first thing we want to do is enumerate what permissions we have. When you find yourself inside of a pod, there's a service account mounted inside the pod, so you don't have to go looking for a service account. You should start by seeing what permissions you have, because you already have a service account associated. So kubectl auth can I -- list, and let's full screen that. Okay, so for pods we can create, we can get logs within a pod. This is good. So given that we can create pods and get logs within them, there's a really good attacker manifest for this situation. And it basically creates a pod and then dumps the credentials that we want into the logs, and then we get those logs. So here we go. We're just going to grab the pod manifest, which is like the definition. Key dumper pod. And this requires no configuration. It doesn't need like an IP or anything. We can pretty much just copy and paste it. So we copy it. We go back to our scenario. Nano. I'm just going to call it pod.yaml. We paste. Save. And then we're going to create it with kubectl-f for file pod.yaml. Now, I just want to mention, if this SSH server was a little more locked down, maybe we wouldn't have write access in this directory. In that case, we would just navigate to the temp folder, and any user usually has write access to that folder. So that would be a workaround. But in this case, we don't have to do that. We can write to the home directory. So here we go. Whoops. It's kubectl create -f and then the name of our file. Key dumper pod has been created. Let's just confirm with kubectl get pods. And there it is. Now we're just going to get the logs using kubectl logs and then the name of our pod. And there we have it. So the reason that this was in the logs, again, is because, let me just go to the pod definition, is because this is the command that's run from inside the pod. So it mounts itself in the PKI directory, which stands for public key infrastructure, and then cat PKI / certificate authority .key. And that's what we want anyways. So yeah. This is a short, sweet scenario. It gets harder. This is just to kind of introduce the concept of creating a malicious pod to elevate privileges within a cluster. I think that most people don't think about cluster security from the perspective of someone broke into our cluster. So you'd actually be surprised how thin security is within a cluster if you can get a foothold inside. So yeah, good luck, keep learning, stay sharp.